I'm not sure who's listening to this today, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. I'm Jeff, son of Linda Nease Scott, and grandnephew of who we called Auntie Helen. Thank you for the opportunity to remember her today. For us grandnieces and nephews, Helen had an interesting name. We called her Auntie Helen, but it was essentially one word, Auntie Helen, with no T. As we grew older, we began to put the pieces together of who she was in our life, that she was Grandpa's sister and thus our grand aunt. We figured out that her first name was not in fact Annie, and we all developed our own ways of pronouncing whatever it was we'd call her. Some of us continued with the familiar Auntie Helen. Others saw to it to pronounce the T, and the more pretentious among us moved towards what we insisted was the grammatically correct Auntie Helen. But her name pronunciation was just about the only place we had any disagreements about her. We all agreed she was pretty great, and for many of the same reasons. What I say here today is a combination of the experiences and feelings my siblings and I had with and for Auntie Helen, but I remain confident my cousins would echo much of what we offer here. Our strongest and most meaningful memories of her were made at Lake Champlain in Vermont. As kids, when we went to the lake, she was there. Today, when we sit and think about our times growing up at the lake, well, she's there, a constant presence in the most meaningful joys of our childhood. Each one of us kids took a lot of enjoyment going up to Vermont by ourselves. That is, without our parents or siblings. Grandpa was most often away on business, which meant we'd be placed in the care of Grandma Nease and Auntie Helen. Jeremy describes these summer sojourns well. We did each other good, he explains. I needed somewhere to be during the summer, and it was good for them to have a teenage boy around, just the two old ladies and a teenage kid. He was right. This meant that we ate very, very well. Grandma would make a steak, and, of course, local Vermont sweet corn on the cob. Auntie Helen would make the cheese grits and dessert, usually something with a graham cracker crust, strawberries, blueberries, and whipped cream. I particularly remember catching a fish dinner was my task. There was a newfound freedom in this task. Where our mother would be too hesitant to let us take the canoe out alone, it was too dangerous. She wouldn't want us to clean the fish. The knives were too sharp, and it made us smell for days. Grandma and Helen would bask in the enjoyment of watching us kids learn to canoe safely. They'd admonish us to be careful as they handed us a knife they hoped would sharpen us to cut through fish scales without causing us to slice open a finger. I'd bring those fish, hopefully some smallmouth bass if I'd done my job right. Grandma would cook them, and Auntie Helen would bring the sides and dessert. The cheese grits were amazing. Though she was born a northerner in Quincy, Massachusetts, Auntie Helen adapted well to the southern Midwest, including the cooking styles. She passed on the cheese grits recipe to family members who wanted it, and those who cook it today can often be heard remarking, "I never know how to get it just like Auntie Helen did." Other times we went out to eat at the Irish Burrow, the Chinese Buffet, or other mom-and-pop diners Auntie Helen discovered throughout the years. She would sometimes say taking us out was a thank you for the work we'd done at the camp. Most times Grandma would stay at the cottage, and there was some alone time with just Auntie Helen. She'd dress up properly for a night out, and we kids would oblige by wearing the cleanest clothes we had left in our suitcase. It didn't really matter where we went to eat. The experience of the outings left us feeling cared about, loved, and stuffed. For a lot of us, Auntie Helen was our first example of a nurse. She knew how to care, to love, and to nurture. One Christmas, the only other time of the year we ever saw Auntie Helen, her nursing skills were on full display. My brother was particularly sick. Someone gave him some Pepto-Bismol to try to help. It didn't work, and he found his way to the bathroom well, it got messy. Auntie Helen was there with him the whole time, caring nothing at all for the mess and caring completely for him. Unsure why that memory sticks, Jeremy notes that Auntie Helen had a gift for loving people through the sick. Somehow, when we were feeling our worst, she knew how to bring warmth and meaning. It was important to her. It strikes me that when asked to talk about some of Auntie Helen's best traits, my brother spoke of her influence in his least desirable moments. My sister Tracy found solace in being able to visit Auntie Helen when she was a student at Southern Nazarene University. At times when being away from family was difficult, Auntie Helen was there, not far away, to counsel her through difficult times. We all will forever remember sitting with her on her porch by the lake doing crossword puzzles, listening to her go on about whatever was on late-night television the evening prior, and talking about whatever new gadget or thingy on TV she had just purchased. When going online became a thing, she was fearless for her age. She would often email us, and was even on Facebook until a loss of memory made it wiser that she wasn't. After she passed, I went on Facebook to reminisce a bit and discovered she had 3 separate Facebook accounts. She'd used one of them to comment on a picture of me, my wife, and my cousin Wesley. I think it was my last communication from her. In later years, Jeremy cherished talking to her about preaching and church. She was always such an encouraging support, commenting on his videos or articles. He cherishes those comments on YouTube. He remembers feeling excited for her when they talked about the new pastor that had just been called to her church at Bethany First, Dr. David Busick. She was renowned in our home for her Christmas gifts. We look forward to receiving her package each year so we could open the package and place each individual gift under the tree. One year, she bought me a dickie. I'd never seen a dickie before. Heck, I'd never even heard of a dickie before. A dickie is a turtleneck shirt without the shirt part. I'm not sure what you're picturing right now, but whatever it is, that's correct. Just what a teenage boy wanted, a dickie. Another year, she bought my brother a big lollipop with a Mickey Mouse on it and wrapped it up. It was a kind of lollipop you'd never really eat because you couldn't do it in one sitting. There's a picture of this monstrosity somewhere, I'm sure. Her gifts were unusual, but we loved them. Jeremy tells of his last visit with her. It was a couple of years ago when he was in Oklahoma City for a conference. It was such a beautiful hour or two as I looked through pictures of family throughout the generations. Every once in a while, memory issues having set in, she'd look at him and say, "Oh, I know you. You're Jeremy." I loved it, he says. I loved her. We all did. She's the last of that generation on our maternal side. It's a certain loss indeed, though in many ways she hasn't been with us for a few years. She was, is, and will always be missed. Further up and further in, Auntie Helen. We'll see you soon.